begins under a bruised desert sky where the sun was sinking low and the wind carried the smell of dust, sage, and something faintly metallic, like old blood baked into the earth, and Caleb Hart, cowboy, ranch hand, and a man who believed he had already seen the worst the frontier could offer, reined his horse to a halt when he spotted the shape lying near the dry arroyo, at first thinking it was a bundle of rags left by travelers, then realizing with a jolt in his chest that it was a woman, motionless, half-draped in a torn crimson shawl, her dark hair fanned across the sand like spilled ink, and in that instant every warning his father ever gave him about stopping alone in Apache territory screamed through his mind, but instinct overruled fear as he dismounted and approached, boots crunching softly, heart pounding so loud he was sure the hills could hear it, and when he knelt beside her he saw no blood, no obvious wound, only strange markings painted along her arms and collarbone in deep red ochre, symbols he didn't recognize but felt rather than understood, ancient and deliberate, and when her eyelids fluttered open to reveal eyes black as wet obsidian, calm rather than afraid, Caleb felt something shift inside him, a pull he could not name, because injured people begged, or cried or reached out, but this woman only looked at him as if she had been waiting, as if he was late, and when she spoke it was in a low voice, broken English shaped by an accent both musical and firm, telling him she could not walk and that the sun must not touch her again before night fully fell, and despite every rational thought telling him to leave, Caleb lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she was, surprised more by the way she relaxed against him like this was the outcome she expected, and he wrapped her in his coat, ignoring the chill crawling up his spine, placed her gently on his horse, and rode hard toward his ranch, unaware that unseen eyes followed from the ridges, that his decision had already crossed an invisible line, and as the stars came out one by one the woman began to hum softly, not a song of pain but something ceremonial, rhythmic, ancient, and when Caleb asked her name she hesitated just long enough to unsettle him before saying it, Naya. Then fell silent again, and by the time they reached the ranch the moon was high and pale, washing everything in silver, and Caleb's sister May froze in the doorway when she saw who he carried, whispering that he was a fool, that Apaches did not leave their wounded behind, that nothing about this felt right, but Caleb brushed past her and laid Naya on the bed, lighting lamps as her skin seemed to glow softly in the flame, the painted symbols clearer now, spiraling and crossing in patterns that made his head ache if he stared too long, and when May reached to clean her arms Naya gently but firmly pulled away, shaking her head and saying the markings must remain until the vow was complete, and that word, vow, lodged in Caleb's mind like a splinter, because what vow could an injured woman be speaking of, and as the night deepened Naya did not worsen, did not groan or bleed, but instead grew stronger, sitting upright, asking for water, for fire, for silence, and when Caleb stepped outside to think, to breathe, to pray maybe, he found the horses restless, stamping and snorting, the cattle uneasy, and far off, carried on the wind, the distant beat of drums, slow and deliberate, and when he turned back, Naya stood in the doorway wrapped in his coat, moonlight outlining her face, telling him softly that he had done well, that he had brought her home as required, and Caleb laughed once, sharply, saying she had it wrong, that this was not her home, that he was only helping, but her gaze never wavered as she explained that among her people, when a woman chose a man beyond the tribe, she must be carried to his land under the guise of weakness, her strength hidden, her intent known only to the spirits, and as her words settled the drums grew louder, closer, and fear finally broke through Caleb's stubborn calm, because nothing about this felt accidental anymore, and when torches flared along the ridge and silhouettes appeared against the stars, Naya reached out and took his hand, not pleading, not afraid, but resolute, telling him the ritual had begun the moment he lifted her from the sand, that whether he wished it or not he was bound to see it through, and as May locked the doors and the drums echoed through the valley, Caleb realized with a cold certainty that the woman he thought he had rescued was never injured at all, and that by acting on compassion alone he had stepped into a tradition older than the land deeds in his saddlebag, older than the ranch, older than the fear gripping his chest now, and as Chapter 1 closes with the night pressing in and the past colliding violently with the present, remember that this story only deepens from here. So if you want to know what happens when love, tradition, and fate collide on the unforgiving frontier, unfolds with the drums no longer distant but surrounding the ranch like a living heartbeat, each thud vibrating through Caleb's bones as torches flickered beyond the fence line and shadowed figures moved with deliberate restraint, not attacking, not shouting, only waiting, and that waiting frightened him more than gunfire ever had, because it felt ceremonial, inevitable, and when Naya stepped forward into the moonlight she no longer looked fragile or weary but upright and commanding, her posture straight, her voice calm as she spoke words in her native tongue that seemed to still the night itself, and one by one the figures lowered their torches and knelt, confirming what Caleb's mind had been resisting. That this woman was not a victim but the center of something sacred, something unstoppable, and when May whispered that he should run, take a horse and flee before dawn, Caleb realized with a bitter twist that even if he did, the choice had already been made, because the ritual was not about capture or force but recognition, and Naya turned to him then, explaining in fuller truth that among her people, a woman who saw a future beyond the tribe could choose a man by spirit rather than blood. But the spirits demanded proof of compassion without expectation, courage without conquest, and that the men must carry her believing her weak, must shelter her believing nothing would come of it, and only then would the bond be revealed, because love chosen without knowledge was the purest form, and Caleb wanted to argue, to deny destiny itself, but every memory of the moment he'd found her, the stillness, the certainty in her eyes, rose up and silenced him, and as dawn broke the Apache elders approached peacefully, offering no threat, only terms, telling Caleb that he could refuse now but the land itself would remember, the spirits would turn away from his cattle, his crops, his bloodline, not as punishment but as consequence, and the weight of that choice settled heavy on his chest, yet when he looked at Naya he saw not a trap but trust, not ownership but invitation, and in that fragile space between fear and wonder he understood that this ritual was not stealing his life but expanding it, asking him to stand between two worlds rather than cling to one, and so he agreed to hear them, to walk the circle, to let the fire and song and silence judge his heart, and over the days that followed he learned their ways while they learned his, suspicion slowly replaced by respect, the ranch becoming a place of shared ground rather than contested soil, and when the final rite came, when Caleb was asked to carry Naya again, this time openly, before both peoples, he did so not as a rescuer but as a partner, and the elders declared the bond complete, a marriage not written in paper but sealed in story, and though danger would still come, from settlers who feared what they did not understand and from conflicts yet to rise, Caleb knew his path was forever changed, because he had learned that the frontier was not conquered by force but shaped by compassion, and as the drums faded into memory and a new life began beneath the same endless sky, remember this. The most powerful stories are born when kindness meets courage, and if this tale moved you, surprised you, or made you see the past in a new light, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more unforgettable stories like this are waiting just beyond the horizon.